maybe the most well-known Allied anti-aircraft vehicles from World War II were the American half-tracks. These mobile, go-anywhere vehicles with great firepower were used widely, and many were supplied to other Allied countries as well. So today we will take a look at the different anti-aircraft variants of the US half-tracks, the reasons behind their development, their variants, and use during the war. So without further ado, let's begin. The anti-aircraft weapons are as old as the military use of planes. Since aviation first became part of the military forces, the aircraft was used to attack ground forces, and those tried to shoot it down in return. Though the static and towed anti-aircraft weapons proved to be effective in the first quarter of the century, but the aviation technologies and military tactics went through massive changes between the two world wars, and especially in the 1920s and 30s. The military aircraft became much more sophisticated, faster, more maneuverable, and carried a bigger, deadlier payload than ever. In addition to the fast progress in aircraft design, the tactics for ground forces changed too. The appearance of tanks and motorized infantry foreshadowed the vision of a much more mobile conflict in the future, very different from the trench warfare of the First World War. With these changes, the static air defenses were not adequate anymore. The quickly advancing troops, and especially the armored columns, were prime targets for aerial attacks. This became very evident in the first part of World War II, during the Battle of France and in North Africa, where the anti-aircraft batteries couldn't keep up with the fast troop movements, be that advance or retreat. A new type of mobile anti-aircraft vehicle was needed, and as it happened many times in the past, the technological advance that brought this new danger to the battlefield also provided the solution, as maybe the most crucial part of these vehicles is a precise and quick gun turret, and the appearance of the powered turrets like the Bendix and M16 designs, which allowed quick traverse and elevation, was just what these vehicles needed. But the weapon system is just one part of the fighting vehicle. To be able to engage enemy planes effectively, it needs to be stable, but also mobile, with good off-road capabilities and big enough to carry the weapons, ammo, and the operating crew. Again, a newly developed vehicle arrived just in time, as the M2 and M3 half-tracks were just ordered into service in 1940. These vehicles came from a long line of armored cars tested by the US forces during the 1930s. The M1, M2 and M3 scout cars were the predecessors of the half-tracks. The first experiment to mate the rear suspension of the T9 half-track to the M3 scout car happened in 1938, and the result was the T7 half-track, which was then further developed to the T14 vehicle. This variant, after some refinement, was standardized as half-track car M2, and the longer variant as half-track personnel carrier M3. Later, when more manufacturing capacity was needed, the International Harvester Company was brought in to help out. The vehicles manufactured by them, in most parts, were identical to the originals, with minor modifications, and they were standardized as half-track car M9 and half-track personnel carrier M5. We won't look very deep into these vehicles, as I have a whole video dedicated to the full history and variants of the M2 and M3 half-tracks, so if you want to know more about them, check it out. These half-tracks seem perfect for the role of the new air defense vehicles, as they were mobile, had good off-road capabilities, and enough carrying capacity for the weapon system, ammo, and crew. So now it was just a matter of time to bring the vehicle and the weapon system together. The Bendix type dual turret was tested on various vehicles, like the T1, which was based on a Dodge truck, and it was also mounted on the M2 half-track, creating the T1E1 variant. In the end, this turret was found to be too complicated and fragile. The M16 design, which was tested about a year later, made a much better impression. An M2 half-track was equipped with this turret, creating the T1E2 variant. During the tests, the M16 turret was found to be reliable, simple, and easy to maintain. It was certainly a much better and simpler design than the one used on the T1E3 prototype, which used a Martin turret similar to the ones used on the B-17 bombers. Not surprisingly, the M16 design came out as a winner from the comparisons, and it was standardized as M13 gun mount. In this mount, the traverse, elevation, and firing of the guns were all electrically operated, with the two machine guns situated on the sides and the gunner sitting between them. Thanks to the electric drive, the turret was able to rotate full 360 degrees in just 6 seconds, and reach full 90 degrees of elevation in less than 2 seconds. Another variant of the M2 chassis was the T28 combination gun motor carriage, which was equipped with two water-cooled 50 caliber machine guns and a 37mm autocannon. These variants, apart from helping to decide which turret design was the best, also highlighted the fact that the M2 chassis is a bit too cramped for this use. So most of the further testing was conducted on the M3 chassis. The first of that line was the T1E4 variant, which was the first iteration of mating the M3 chassis with the M33 mount. This was the variant that was accepted into production as M13 multiple gun motor carriage in July 1943. The similar variant built on the International Harvester M5 chassis was designated M14. The M13 and M14 were successful and deemed satisfactory by the Army, but they started looking for ways to increase the firepower of these vehicles. One of these attempts was the T37 model, which mounted 4 50 caliber machine guns in a revolving turret, followed by the T37E1, which mounted the same number of machine guns but in a different layout. The test results for these vehicles, however, were underwhelming, so the search continued. The idea to use the successful M33 Maxim mount but add 2 more machine guns to it resulted in the T61 gun mount, which was tested on the M2 chassis, creating the T58 multiple gun motor carriage. The tests of the new mount were very successful, and it was accepted as M45 gun mount. Using this new quad mount on the M3 chassis created the M16 multiple gun motor carriage, now with twice the firepower of the M13 variant. The M17 was again a sub-variant of this type, which used the International Harvester M5 chassis, and it was intended for Lend-Lease. But there were several other ideas to increase the firepower of the anti-aircraft vehicles. One of them was the T10 variant, which basically replaced the machine guns on the Maxim mount with 20mm Oerlikon cannons, and used the M2 chassis. Its M3-based variant, the T10E1, was actually put into production in 1944, but these cannons were so troublesome that in the end the vehicles were rebuilt as M16s. The T28E1 variant was similar to the M2-based T28, and used a 37mm autocannon and 2 water-cooled 50 caliber machine guns. Unlike the M2-based variant, this version was field tested in North Africa, with success. Eventually this variant was put into production as combination gun motor carriage M15, with the water-cooled machine guns swapped for air-cooled ones, and later the M15A1 variant featuring the new M3A1 gun mount, which positioned the machine guns under the cannon. But from firepower, you can never have enough. Someone came up with the idea to install basically a turret from an Elco boat on a half-track. Different gun configurations were tested with this turret, such as 4 20mm cannons and 2 50 caliber machine guns, or 2 20mm cannons and 6 50 caliber machine guns, or simply 4 20mm cannons. In the end, this variant was found too cumbersome, the reload of the guns was problematic, and the weight of the turret and the guns was too much for the chassis. There were also numerous experimental versions to mount the 40mm Bofors gun on the half-tracks, like the T54 and T54E1 variants, later the T59 and T59E1. A combination gun mount was also tested, mounting 2 50 caliber machine guns in addition to the 40mm cannon, similarly as on the M15. This was the T60 variant. But maybe the most extreme was the T68 model, which featured 2 40mm cannons mounted on top of each other. These variants all failed, as the recoil of the gun was too heavy, and compromised the stability of the vehicle. The only successful 40mm conversion was an Australian field modification, where they converted a number of vehicles to carry the 40mm gun in a revolving turret. These, however, were intended as ground support vehicles, so the stability was less of an issue. The M16, similarly to the original M3 half-track, was 21 feet 4 inches long, 7 feet 1 inches wide, and 7 feet 8 inches tall, and it weighed around 9 tons. It was powered by White 160AX petrol engine, producing 128 horsepower. The vehicle had a top speed of 41 miles an hour and a range of 175 miles. Its half-inch thick armor provided protection against small arms fire, and its armament consisted of 4 50 caliber machine guns, which could be elevated 90 degrees or depressed -11 degrees, but only to the side. It could not fire over the cabin unless it was elevated 5 degrees. As we mentioned, the earliest combat experience for these half-tracks was in North Africa, with 8 of the T-28 E1 variants. These vehicles proved to be very useful during Operation Torch, the Battle of Kasserine Pass, and later during the invasion of Sicily. The M15 and M15 A1 production variants served through World War II, participating in the Normandy landings, the invasion of southern France, and everywhere on the Western Front. The first use of the M13 variants happened when the Allies invaded Italy in 1943, and later at the NCO landings in 1944, though they only seen limited use as only 139 units were deployed in Europe. The International Harvester M14 variants were supplied to the British, but most of those vehicles were rebuilt as troop carriers. Only a few months later, the M13 vehicles were replaced by the M16 variants, which entered service early 1944 and carried twice as many guns in the same package. These vehicles saw extensive use all through the European theater and participated in all major operations in Italy, France, and in the Low Countries up until the end of the war. They usually served alongside the M15 variants. Each US Armored Division was allocated an anti-aircraft battalion fielding both M15 and M16 vehicles. Apart from defending troops and convoys, they were also used to protect important locations, like bridges and junctions. As effective as these vehicles were in the anti-aircraft role, by the time they entered service, the main reason for their existence was pretty much gone, as by 1944 the Allies enjoyed air superiority over most of Europe. This was very prominent during the D-Day landings, where the Allies expected the full power of the Luftwaffe to defend the shores, but only encountered relatively weak resistance in the air. The anti-aircraft half-tracks were still very useful, but many times, instead of used in their intended role, they were deployed as ground support, and the troops loved the fire support of these vehicles, as the combined firepower of the 450 caliber machine guns was devastating. The M16 was mainly used on the Western Front, but 1,000 of the M17 variants were supplied to the Soviet Union, where they were named ZSU-17s. After World War II, the US Army quickly started to downsize, and many surplus half-tracks were given to Allied countries. Belgium, France, West Germany, Spain, and other countries received many of these vehicles. When the Korean War broke out, at first the US Army transported vehicles stationed in Japan to counter the threat, including the remaining M15 and M16 half-tracks, but again they were mostly used for ground support role. As there were only a limited number of M16s available, 1,662 M3 half-tracks were converted using the new M45F gun mount, which raised the gun 6 inches higher than the original design and featured the new large batwing armor plates to protect the loaders and the gunner. By late 1951, the type was declared limited standard, and by 1958 declared obsolete, as newer designs like the M42 Duster appeared. Though these anti-aircraft vehicles had a relatively short service life, they were numerous and very adaptable, and successful both in the anti-aircraft and ground support role. Together with the other half-track variants, they will be remembered as iconic vehicles of World War II. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.